Hi, I'm Alan, an LLM Emeritus, which is posh for retired reader at St James's Church, and I'm thinking about Rogation time this week. During the lockdown, like many of you I expect, I've been spending much more time in the garden. I'm no Percy Thrower, nor Mike O'Brien either, but I have been able to do some work, albeit under strict supervision. My remit runs to cutting the grass, watering, structural digging and selective weeding, mainly of the nasty things that scratch like brambles. So, because of this new outdoor life of mine, let me share some thoughts with you about God's amazing gift of nature and how they sustain and feed us on our lonely planet. Last week, Vicky mentioned Rogation tide and reminded us of the old custom of beating the bands. For this week, the Church celebrates Rogation, a time for blessing, a time for praying for good crops. Rogation and harvest go hand in hand. At Rogation we should say please, just as at harvest we should say thank you. Remember how often we've heard parents saying to their children, "Don't forget to say please and thank you," especially when they're off to a party or a visit to their grandparents. Well, this week we can remember a tradition of saying please to God, whereas at harvest we thank him for his bounty. Although the sowing and rearing of young animals tends to be an all-year-round occupation for farmers nowadays, these annual festivals need to be grounded in time. And in our latitude, it's perhaps no coincidence that Rogation always falls during the Easter season, when we've celebrated the new life in Christ given to us through his sacrifice and resurrection. The skills and resources of the agricultural industry would be as nothing if they did not make space and allowance for the natural seasons, part of God's creation. You might remember the story of the vicar, not ours of course, talking to the old man tending his garden. "Ah," said the vicar, "you and God together are looking after his creation." "Yes, vicar," replied the old man, "but you should see the state it gets to when I leaves it to him." Certainly, I expect a few of us have ecology corners as excuses not to tackle the over and undergrowth of our gardens, but hopefully we won't blame God for our lack of resolve or effort. For that would be unfair, of course. But if nothing less, it reminds us of that partnership we have with God, abiding in him and he in us. And so that is why we should be asking God for his blessing and his help to nourish the crops now that will feed us in the future, that we hope to give thanks for at harvest time. So why is Rogation tide important to us here in West End? We may have gardens or allotments, but unlike farmers and fishermen, our livelihoods may not be so directly dependent on the fortunes of nature. But this time, like harvest, does remind all of us of the absolute need to work with God in harmony with the gifts and resources he provides. And that includes the gifts and talents that we possess, both individually and as members of our communities. Even in these times, when so much suffering is being caused by the coronavirus, it's simply not enough just to send up SOS prayers for help every time there's some emergency or disaster. Our prayers need to be genuine inquiries to God as to how we, in partnership with him, can deal with our lives and the lives of others to honour his covenant, and in thanksgiving for the salvation that Christ achieved for us by his death and resurrection. This year there is much about the future that is unknown. What will the harvest yield? How will we be feeding ourselves? How even will we be buying our provisions? How easy will it be for us to travel and for goods and provisions to be transported? Now more than ever, we need to remember to thank God for what he does provide, and hope that our future holds out the promise of a harvest that will support and prosper us once again. And so now a prayer for this day of hope and trust. Grant, O Lord, that we may rightly value the whole of your creation, that we may seek our righteousness in all our dealings with one another, that we may bear each other's burdens in obedience to your will, that in all things we may hold to your will and purpose, open to your holiness and truth. Amen.